Pete. Hello, Jim. How's it going? How's everyone doing? Welcome to this is very excited about this event. And today, my name is Eduardo. I'm based in New York City. I'm a marketing manager here at Modern Sales Pros. And today, New York City, it's very sunny, feels like spring. So, audience, while we give some time for people to join us, I'm going to do a quick icebreaker with the speakers, but I also want to hear from you, audience. Let us know where you're calling from in the chat. I see some people from Santa Barbara. Oh, we have people from Berlin, Germany. What time is it that now in Berlin? Is it?
8 o'clock.
It's like 8 p.m., 9 p.m.
Thank you for joining us after hours. I
Waterloo.
want to ask the speakers, what is your favorite season of the year? Since in New York we are changing from winter to spring today. Jim, what is your favorite season?
And I just was asked the question, and where I'm at in St. Louis, we get all 4 seasons, and we get the extreme of all 4 seasons. So I'll take the easy answer and say whatever the next season is usually my favorite one. So in the
Because you're
spring,
you're done with it.
yeah, I'm done with winter, which hasn't been that bad of one. We got baseball. The Cardinals is big. Pulse for Gainsight is always in the spring, and I'm an avid golfer, as Pete knows, and we can
Oh
start
yeah.
golfing. We can start golfing again with normal weather. So talk to me in June, and I'll tell you summer. So
That sounds good. It's very optimistic. Always excited about the future. Good to know. What about you, Pete? What's your favorite season of the year?
So we live in San Francisco, which only has one season, 68 degrees and gray. And so I would say that my favorite season is winter. In California, right? I'm from Southern California. I'm also, from like live in San Francisco. So I guess it doesn't really count as winter because then in winter we can drive to the snow in like Tahoe or Mammoth or what have you. So maybe I'm like cheating in that regard, but I'm going to say California winter is my favorite season there.
Oh, that sounds good. I would say it is cheating because winters in New York
It's
really
totally cheating.
is not the same thing. But let's focus on this event today. So, audience, thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you, Pete and Jim, for joining me here. We're here today to talk about how Gainsight created a sales team culture of high performance with some of the brightest minds in the business. So, audience, again, feel free to share in the chat where you're tuning in from, and we want to see the global footprint of our elite community. We've got a fantastic lineup here today to talk about the culture at Gainsight. And these insights you're going to hear here today, you won't find just anywhere, only here at Modern Sales Pros. And for those of you new here, welcome to Modern Sales Pros. We are the world's largest and finest community for more than 35,000 members in sales management, leadership, operations, and enablement. We are all about taking the road less traveled and bringing you along for the journey with us. And our mission is to help you tackle tough questions and discover opportunities you might not even know exist. We do this through vibrant sessions like this one you're about to experience. We have an engaging online forum. Pete loves the online forum. It's very fun. We have quarterly summits. We just had one last week, so I'm going to drop a link later so you can access the recordings. And we also have in-person events nationwide. So we might be coming to a city near you and you can meet us live. If you're not yet part of the MSP League, you will be invited to join us right after this event if you are a good fit. But let's focus on this event here. We want to get the most out of it. So please use the Q&A. I was talking with the speakers about seasons and things changing. And I asked them, what keeps your energy going with all those changes and seasons and stuff and sales not great and the marketing changing all the time? And they said, we love teaching and answering questions. So if you have any questions, just go into the chat and the Q&A and they will make sure to answer your questions here today. And finally, this event is being recorded. So you will be able to access all this knowledge at any moment in the future. That's enough about me and MSP and how to get the most out of this event. So audience, feel free to go into the chat. We have a survey at the end of this event. So please stick around. We will ask you some questions. But Pete, I'm going to pass it to you right now. You can introduce yourself, introduce us to Atrium, and start this conversation because we are very excited. And I'll be back later for some outro notes. Sounds good?
It sounds absolutely fantastic, Eduardo. ahead and share my screen right here so we can get this. Can you guys see that okay there? My external monitor is being grumpy right now. Can you see that okay, Jim?
Yeah, looks good.
All right, lovely. Well, hey, folks, I am super pumped to be hanging out with Jim here today, mainly because Jim is Jim is a kindred spirit of mine who thinks a lot about engendering, um, cultures of high performance, whether it's in the sales organization or on like the sporting field or just kind of in life in general. Like, how do you engender these cultures of performance? And which is particularly useful because like this is something that we here at Atrium think about quite a bit, because we make what we like to call sales performance management software that helps organizations really improve rep attainment through the better measurement, management, and improvement of performance there. I think we're gonna actually we're doing kind of related through to this. I think we're doing a promotion where we're hosting a virtual summit, excuse me, a virtual sales management bootcamp that we're paying for, being taught by Richard Harris. I think it's a half day event that's essentially focused on frontline sales management, and and I think we're going to go ahead and drop that in the chat here, for folks who want to sign up for that. So before we get started, a couple of introductions here. My name is Pete Kazanji. I'm one of the founders of Atrium. As I noted earlier, we make sales performance management software. I'm also one of the founders of Modern Sales Pros. Prior to Atrium, I started and sold a recruiting software company called Talentbin that was acquired by Monster Worldwide in 2014. I guess it's been a second. And subsequent to that, I ended up writing a book on startup sales called Founding Sales. But I think a lot about high performance sales organizations, kind of operationally excellent, analytically excellent, performance excellent sales organizations. So I'm pretty passionate about it. And that's kind of where Atrium came from. Would love to introduce Jim. Jim is is a seasoned sales leader and sales professional. Jim, want to give folks kind of a rundown on what you spend your time, what Gainsight does, and what you spend your time doing over there?
Yeah, definitely. So I'm entering about midway through my 10th year here at Gainsight. I started as an individual contributor, became a frontline leader about 5 years ago, and have then became a second line leader. Now lead all of our global sales today. So net new logos, strategic accounts. So Gainsight, it's really around managing your customers success. So how can we, our technology is helping you help your customers become successful, whether that be through CSMs and driving high touch customer success management motions, or digital led motions like through community, like a Modern Sales Pros, or through education. And then also doing kind of as you grow and scale, and we keep hearing about EBITDA the last couple of years, how can we do this most efficiently? So that's what Gainsight does, by taking all your different data sources on your customers, helping you become proactive with them and driving those outcomes.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, it's funny that, like, as I've known Gainsight, and I've been lucky enough to have Gainsight as a customer here for the last couple years. It's been remarkable to see the change in the organization, going from an organization that is synonymous with customer success. It's still synonymous with customer success, right? When you think about customer success, you think about Gainsight. When you think about Gainsight, you think about customer success. But then expanding the product suite offering there to things that are tangential to that, or kind of like kind of underpinning that, like product analytics, customer education, customer communities, and so on, which obviously has impacts associated with how you guys sell, or as an organization. Obviously, like as you guys have created this market of this concept of like a customer success platform, you know, and become the leader in that market, obviously that gives you a tailwind. But then, of course, then there are economic headwinds, as you were mentioning earlier, around like, okay, cool, can we get more scale out of these customer success folks, et cetera, et cetera. Like, and so I think, and of course, like in sales organizations, it's always a moving target there. So building this market, and then while contending with these economic headwinds, adding more products that then people have to sell, that and new folks that are new personas to sell to, et cetera, et cetera. So it's quite the journey that you guys have been on, but it's been really awesome to kind of watch. And so one of the things that I want to talk about really specifically here, and I'm excited to have Jim here, as folks kind of noted, or sorry, as Jim noted earlier, he's been at Gainsight for around 10 years now, and Gainsight actually has like a really remarkable, they have a absolutely fantastic kind of tenure, like average tenure in their organization. And so I want to talk about kind of like the journey that Gainsight is, and what a lot of our customers have been doing around bringing like higher performance management and more kind of performance management into their organizations, and kind of like layering that in with the existing cultures and kind of changing cultures and so on and so forth. So that's like kind of like what we're going to be talking about here. A lot of people are thinking about this right now. I've been hosting a number of like CRO dinners recently where CROs and VPs of RevOps are talking about like how can we change the mindsets in our organization to one of high performance, kind of demanding excellence versus kind of like inspiring and motivating, kind of like having inspiration and motivation, but also having accountability and coaching as well. And so the big thing, so that's why I'm excited to talk with Jim about today. The big thing that I always kind of come back to in this regard, and I'm excited to have Jim kind of opine on this as well, is that the crux of sales manage, or like sales performance management, and kind of driving that kind of cultural change is really around frontline management. And so this is something that excuse me, that Gartner has kind of meditated on pretty substantially, is that really it's those frontline managers that are kind of like the difference between high performance and not, right? And so really what you see in an organization with higher performing managers who are ready, willing, and able to demand high performance, to drive accountability and to drive kind of coaching behaviors, is all sorts of better things. Yeah, you get higher rep productivity, and you get better retention. You even get like higher level of effort from your reps. But the big thing really is, and what drives this, is that you're likely to get more top performers. And where that kind of comes from is, so that's Gartner's take on that. Kind of where that comes from a data standpoint, this woman, Michelle Vazana, who's one of the authors of Cracking the Sales Management Code with Jason Jordan, she wrote another book called Crushing Quota that's all about sales management. And so the big thing that she put some numbers around this, that the top 25% of managers end up generating 40% more revenue than the bottom 25%. Okay, so that's more attainment. But the big thing there is that the top managers really got more reps to quota, right? It's not that they're getting their higher performers to like perform higher. There's, I think we all have our various folks in our organizations who, are going to be high performing regardless of the environment that they're in. But unfortunately, you can't staff an entire sales organization with only top performers. Wish that was the case. Wish you could just go to like Home Depot and buy yourself like a dozen of them. Go to Costco, maybe get like 3 dozen high performers. Doesn't really work that way, right? And so what we have to do as managers and leaders who enable managers, right, like kind of like the next level down, is raise up those folks that are kind of in the middle of the pack to get to the higher end of the pack, right? So like move the A minuses to A's, move the B pluses to A minuses, move the B's to B pluses, et cetera, et cetera. And then the way that really happens is kind of through more and better hands-on management and performance management there. So, organizations who facilitate that hands-on management behavior versus I was talking with a client the other day, a client of ours the other day. They're essentially doing a kind of a restart of their Atrium implementation with us because they're moving from a quarterly performance management cadence to a monthly one. And the reason why was because they found that doing it, doing performance management or having an operating rhythm cadence that was quarterly really kind of took the foot off the gas with their managers, right? And then lastly, the thing I'll kind of touch on here is that organizations that then invest as appropriate into manager enablement, whether it's like training or kind of like tooling or software or what have you, that is manager facing, end up facilitating that leverage as well. So I'm going to pause really quickly there. Jim, any sort of comments you'd like to make on kind of manager enablement and what you've seen in terms of the importance of empowering those frontline managers?
No, for sure. I think it's probably the last kind of frontier of enablement within a company, especially in sales. It's, we've been lucky enough here at Gainsight to always have a great nurturing and performance focused sales management and it evolves as you go through different stages, and it's different things you're focusing on. But all of our managers that have been promoted in or to the next level, it's kind of like, hey, go do what you were doing before. And I think I've seen this in a lot of other organizations. Hey, you were a great rep, go do what you did. And I think it's, it's a common theme, and kind of the managers that do really well adapt, and they're not necessarily super rep. We've kind of left these managers to their own devices, so to speak.
Yeah.
And I know as I became a frontline manager, I was lucky enough, Brian Hamlin, my CRO, CSO at the time, and he was very hands-on, and I was managed by him, so I understood kind of what it took. And he's very nurturing, performance-oriented, very tactical. And so I was lucky enough to have those things. And then when we met, probably it's coming up on 3 years now, I saw Atrium, and I'm like, wow, this will help everybody have a map to how they can manage their team, individually, as opposed to just kind of doing the peanut butter spread type of
or like being in every single deal and like super repping it or whatever. And I think, man, the map is a great metaphor there. And of course, we'll have to, hopefully Brian Hamlin's ears are burning right now. I would text him on like iMessage on my other screen, but I don't want to be distracted. I think I hosted this CRO dinner in New York the other day, and there was this woman who came out of EMC. She had been at HubSpot. She had been at HubSpot for 10 years. Another fantastic sales culture there. Performance orientated, kind of a good mixture, right? Like and I think we'll talk about that here in a second. And she had this really great point, which was that she spent her first 5 years of her career at EMC, hard charging sales culture, right? Like we were joking about this because I worked at VMware back when I was a product manager and a product marketer. And you could always tell the EMC people who had come into town, because EMC owned VMware, because they would all be like wearing suits. And then we at VMware, we're all like, wearing our jeans and what have you. And so like very formal, very hard charging sales organization. And then, HubSpot had a different culture, but also very performance orientated too, still in Boston. And we were talking about how, if you think about where managers learn how management is supposed to be done, it comes from how they've been managed. And so that can be pretty tough here in the last like 5 to 10 years for a bunch of different reasons. One is you have, a low interest rate environment where, high win rates, lots of inbound leads, lots of, kind of easy wins, et cetera. People spend a lot of money on kind of like tooling and what have you. One, and then two, with of course like the pandemic and a lot of like organizations, remote, a lot of junior staff being remote. One, those junior staff, as they matriculated, didn't have the like side by side way of observing. Like they saw how they were managed, maybe, via Slack or via Zoom or what have you. But then it was harder for them to observe how a manager managed other folks on the sales floor, as an example, right? And so I think that like these things, like there's a combination of things, and then of course like folks who like were managers for the first time in the last like 5 or 10 years in a expansionary economic environment, also like the management like moves, like the management muscles, the football moves are a little bit different from a lever standpoint, right? So if you're worried about quota capacity and potential repetition, well, you're probably going to focus more on words of encouragement and kind of like validation and affirmation and things like that, which is great. But you probably weren't as much focused on accountability and maybe coaching behaviors because it's raining budget, it's raining money, et cetera, et cetera. Whereas now things are substantially different. I think, Jim, we were kind of joking about this earlier around kind of economic headwinds and kind of organizations really kind of like sharpening their pencils. And what that means is that whereas previously maybe AE pipeline generation or AE pipeline hygiene or AE activity was something that like maybe we didn't have to hold reps as accountable to. Well, now we do, but you got a bunch of folks who are like have never done it before. They're not like super comfortable with it, and so it's kind of like, oh boy, I gotta like learn this muscle. And I think that that's a really important thing that folks need to remember is I remember having this conversation with our sales lead here, a gentleman named Sean Cardenas, where we were talking, like people talk about coaching a lot, right? They talk about coaching, and I think coaching is great. And like Jim and I geek out on this stuff all the time because he's a big football guy. His son is a former football player as well. But I think coaching in terms of like skill change or skill enhancement, it's just one part of management. Right. Another part of management is encouragement, because like sales is hard and kind of we get our ass kicked by prospects all the time. You lose a deal you should have won. You got bad beats all the time, right? Somehow we always forget the deals that we win that we shouldn't have won, right? Like the Bluebirds, but that's okay, right? But then there's another piece to this too, which is like, there's a bunch of stuff that we have to do as sellers, or so that our sellers have to do, our SDRs have to do, our AMs, our CSMs have to do, that isn't like the funnest thing in the world. It's like work, right? It's like, got to do your work. And so oftentimes, that's where managers also have to bring managerial behavior to bear, is driving accountability on those things. And I think the important thing is that it can't be one of these things. Like you have some managers whose perception is that they are, they exist to be the number one cheerleader for their staff. And what I would say is like, that is an important thing to do. But if you only have this and you don't have this right here, then as an example, just like a really good example, like that's a bad situation. And I'll give you an example of a bad, like why that's bad. You have high performers who view the encouragement that everybody receives, irrespective of whether or not maybe that encouragement is deserved, right? Like if you have somebody who's like a lower performer and needs improvement, but you have a manager who's like blowing rainbows about that person, that's actually like, that's going to demotivate high performers. Or similarly, if you have someone who's underperforming or not doing the things that they're supposed to be doing, they're not rowing the way that they're kind of like mailing it in on their shuttle runs or their sprints, like their wind run, their conditioning sprints, right, Jim? You have a rep who's mailing it in on those things, but you see, and the other reps observe that, and then when they see that there's no accountability for that, again, that's demotivating for your high performers, your upper performers, et cetera. So it really is like, I think of it as kind of like, a triangle or like a tripod, kind of three parts of a stool, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that this is kind of like where management comes from, is like, you got to do these three things well. And we're going to talk about how folks can do that, and if you don't do it, it's kind of like woe betide you as a manager. Jim, is there anything you wanted to add on this?
No, I think it was when times were fat, 18, 24 months ago, you let the slip deal go. You left that stuck deal be stuck.
Yep.
Go, that's this pipeline for next quarter. Dave Kellogg talked about rolling hairballs, that these deals that keep getting kicked out to the next quarter, to the next quarter.
Rolling hairballs, amazing.
And if we're hitting our numbers, okay, that's cool. We'll close that next time. And Sharon asked in the questions, like, what's high performance management besides reps to quota? I think it's just that we got to flip it over to, what we're starting to track now is we're putting together scorecards that reps are going to be able to reference. It's not just quota attainment, but it's, am I doing the daily activities? Am I getting multi-threaded?
That's going to drive to that.
Do I have stuck deals? What was my days between touches on open opportunities? Those will all lead to pipeline moving from top of funnel through the funnel. And then, it's really hard to predict a close date. So we understand it might move from March 31st to April 15th, right? Because it's red lines or whatever. So if we're doing all those right things, getting multi-threaded, staying in touch, driving those things, that's kind of what high performance management for me is. It's not Mike managing those things, but identifying by rep, that's the coaching part. It's like, hey, if we looked at this, do you have enough meetings? Or do you have enough pipeline? Okay, do you have enough meetings? Why don't you have enough meetings? Are we not? We have enough pipeline, but we're not closing. Well, okay, are we getting multi-threaded? What kind of conversations are we having? So we can identify, within the pipeline, where are some areas that we can help. That's kind of how I think about what high performance management is. It's not just, hey, you're not hitting quota, let's beat you over the head and get you on the right track. It's more,
but we're not going to, but we can't ignore it. And I think that's a big challenge that folks have had is they said, hey, look, like I'm going to be okay with a rep doing $200,000 of bookings a year, even though he or she maybe cost me 150 or whatever. That might have been the case 24 months ago. That's not the case anymore, right? Like we can't ignore, as this might, I'm a broken record, but as Steve Goldberg, the CRO at SalesLoft, likes to say, like, we're not here to admire a problem. We can't ignore these things, right? And so what that means is accountability. Like, hey, you're not at the level of customer-facing meetings that we expect. You're not multi-threaded in your deals. Okay, let's do coaching behavior on. Let me show you how to go through LinkedIn Sales Navigator. Right, and find the contacts in your organization. Great, let's go ahead and show you how you can. I did a session like this with one of my reps the other day where I said, hey, let's go ahead and we'll identify all the second level leaders in this organization that you're already in with at the CRO and the VP of Ops level. But like, hey, let's not like be happy about that. Like, let's move ahead and find all the next level down and LinkedIn connect to those folks with a friendly message. Sure, is everyone gonna like respond back to you? No, not at all. But like maybe we get 30% or we get 40%, and then maybe we get like another 30% of those folks, on a sideline like disco meeting, et cetera, et cetera. So showing the reps those behaviors, right, and then coaching them on that comes from the identification of a shortfall here. But if we ignore that problem, right, then we're never going to get to the good outcomes. And before I move on here, probably like one of my favorite business books on this topic is by a football coach named Bill Walsh. It's called The Score Takes Care of Itself. And so he was a football coach at San Jose State, and then at Stanford, and then at for the 49ers. And so the name of the book is The Score Takes Care of Itself, because in any sort of complicated behavior, right, any sort of complicated motion or like multi-person involved thing, it's very difficult to directly impact the outputs. As Jim was kind of saying earlier, it's hard to predict the close date, right? But if we focus on the inputs, right? And so in Bill Walsh's case, if you are, one football player and you focus on doing your job excellently, play after play after play after play, and everybody does that, right? If everybody does that together and we gain 4 yards every snap, well, then good outcomes are going to come, right? But we can't hope for good outcomes and ignore those precursors, right? Hoping that those good outcomes will come. And no, instead we measure and we pay attention to these precursors, knowing that if we do them excellently, then the scoreboard takes care of itself. And so when you think about how that happens in sales organizations, these are sort of like this is like a vocabulary of like actions that managers should be doing. Yeah, most managers don't really they don't need to be reminded to do deal inspection and deal strategy. Of course, most sales managers come from having been reps previously. So that's kind of second nature there. But oftentimes that's the only thing that they're doing, right? And so then what you want to do is actually make sure that your sales management motion is more expansively broken out, where you're having one-on-ones that are distinct from pipeline inspections, right? Different from deal inspections, that instead are focused on data and metrics, right? So Jim was talking about a rep scorecard at Gainsight. I was talking to another gentleman, a CRO, the other day, where he was talking. They have a concept internally of a rep in good standing, which is a scorecard. It has output metrics, of course, like bookings and kind of like the quota attainment on a quarterly basis in a trailing time period. But then it has precursors as well, right? So like as Jim was kind of noting, I think in their case, they're really a key initiative for them is pipeline generation of an ancillary product that the organization acquired. So there's core pipeline movement, and core pipeline coverage. And then of course there's this new product, which I forget exactly what it does. I'm the worst. But the number of opportunities that each rep has in their pipe that has that product, right? And net new of that, and then how much bookings are coming from that. And so like that's their scorecard. And then they have an ancillary scorecard as well, kind of like more cultural things like, are you a good participant in team meetings? Are you kind of going out of your way to help your teams, et cetera, et cetera? But like those are the sort of things that would be covered in a non-pipeline review one-on-one, because that's really the place where you're going to identify shortfalls and then get ahead and kind of fix those, right? All of this can be done like either metrically, where you set, like you say, hey, we're going to be paying attention to these tiles on a dashboard, or you can set some very, very specific goals on those items as well, right? And then of course this is extremely important during a new hire ramp. I don't know, some organizations are backfilling folks right now, not a lot of folks doing a ton of hiring. Maybe that'll kind of clean up here in a second. But monitoring these various things in ramp ends up being a very kind of critical thing. The big challenge that we see when we talk to our customers and kind of like talk to prospects who are not yet Atrium customers is there's kind of like two major things that end up kind of blocking kind of this managerial behavior. One is the existing tool chain that is being offered to these managers ends up being very, very heavyweight kind of analytics offerings, right? So horizontal analytics like Salesforce dashboarding, or like Tableau or Looker, Power BI, et cetera, which which is great for like sales ops, right? Or great for the data team who we're playing with Excel documents in the crib, but oftentimes can be a little bit more challenging for line managers and what have you, who come from they come from a persuasion background, they come from an empathy background, they come from an interpersonal interaction background, all of which are obviously extraordinarily important skills in sales, but not necessarily coming from an analytical background. And then the second thing that we often hear from organizations, especially this is like the last 5 to 10 years, is you have managers who sometimes are hesitant to coach and performance manage, whether that's first-time managers who haven't had performance management behaviors demonstrated to them by kind of their prior managers, or people who've kind of like fallen out of repair, right? Like they've fallen out of like being used to doing that performance management behavior for the reasons that we were talking about over the last 2, 3, 5 years, 10 years of kind of like easy times and what have you. Jim, any kind of comments on how you've seen this show up in different organizations?
Yeah, there's a lot there, but yeah, it's people, they want having the data in front of you makes the uncomfortable conversation easier, and then turning it around to like, hey, what's in it for them, as opposed to, hey, you are bad, you are not good, I need
Right.
to focus on that, and then kind of, you said they focus solely on deal assistance. That's when you fall into being a super rep if you're a manager, and you're going to try to get them out of their quagmire, by pulling them out by, I'm going to close your deals for you. And it's like, okay, well, that doesn't help me. I need you to teach me how to fish and things like that. So no, you're spot on.
Yeah, and I think that's oftentimes what we see is this is kind of, instead of doing instead of doing these behaviors right here, they just kind of end up doing these behaviors. So we're going to talk a little bit about like maybe some ways that folks can do this better, to make sure that folks are embedding effective performance management into their operating rhythms. Um, First, I want to share a little bit about what we do here at Atrium. I mean, in short, what we seek to do is to help improve that sales performance management behavior by those managers, and also automate it a little bit, right? So make it such that reps can self-manage, that there's some kind of like, automated assistant management is like what we like to call it here. So rather than asking our frontline managers or our reps to like, dashboard dive and kind of get lost in the sauce, instead using analytics, but also large language model AI to do that, a lot of that interpretation and recommendation for folks there. And so this is something that we, especially in the last year or so, have done quite a bit around with Atrium, is layering on what we call performance management and AI performance management functionality to interpret the metrics that are in place, or the anomalies or kind of alerts and kind of like goal behavior that's happening, to just tell the manager directly, like, hey, here's what's going on with this rep, here's what's good, here's what's maybe less good, right? Here's the areas that you should be focusing on, and then help them just really easily be able to do managerial actions, right? So it kind of goes back to the things we were saying about previously, like, hey, taking coaching actions. Let's talk about your untouched ops situation and your stuck ops situation. Like, let's cover this in our next one-on-one. Or hey, or alternatively, and ideally both, let's do some encouragement behavior. Like, hey, saw that you were really crushing it on XYZ. That's great, right? And I think oftentimes what managers don't do enough of is they don't do enough of that on its face, right? They'll do like the praise sandwich. Hey Jim, saw you did a really good job around XYZ, but also notice this, right?
Right.
Sometimes you can just show up and say, hey, you did a great job on this right here. That's awesome. Fist bump. And essentially what you're doing is, as a manager, you're kind of putting a deposit in the bank that you're probably going to withdraw maybe in a week, or a couple of weeks, or what have you. But it's okay to do that on its face, right? It's okay to do that encouragement behavior by itself. It's also okay to do that coaching behavior by itself. But importantly, you want to do a lot of these actions. And so I think from a managerial standpoint, kind of the thing we were talking about earlier on, the score takes care of itself. You kind of want to have the same mindset as a manager, which is lots of touches on the ball, right? Lots of touches on the rep, not like kind of like letting folks just hang out by themselves. And so this is kind of the idea that we've really focused on here at Atrium, is to make it such that the interpretation of what's going on is super easy because it's being done by large language AI, and then also making such that managers don't have to, dig through things, identifying where those issues are, but instead can spend their time taking action to do that encouragement behavior, do that coaching behavior, and do that accountability behavior there. Um, and so, not only does that happen, in a manager facing capacity, this is actually something that Atrium does quite a bit, that is rep facing, which ends up being pretty, people have, like, we were surprised at how receptive people were to this. And I think it's because a manager has 6 reports, they've got 8 reports, et cetera, and they're spending a lot of time on deals and kind of different tasks. So having something that talks directly to the rep, that shows up in their inbox, in their Slack, and kind of gives them that motivation, but that also gives them kind of coaching behavior too. Like, hey, you're really crushing it on bookings. That's really fascinating, or fantastic. High five. Hey, let's talk about that prospecting behavior.
Right.
Right. So making sure that that's happening, and can happen in an automated fashion, ends up being a very powerful thing. This is something that, as we started working on this in the last year, Gartner has been a big fan of like what we're up to, and we've been working with a large number of like very high, scaled sales organizations as well, including like amazing folks like Gainsight here, Envoy, WorkRamp, etc. So that's a little bit on us here at Atrium. So I want to talk about how to kind of systematize these performance management behaviors. The big thing that I want to talk about, number one, is this notion of like blocking managerial time, right, to do these behaviors. I'm a big operating rhythm guy, so like, rather than trying to have to remember things to do at any given point in time, just make sure that it's on the calendar in a recurring fashion. Some examples of what these behaviors can be would be things like, pipeline review. A lot of people don't really need a reminder to do pipeline reviews, right? It's probably the number one thing that folks are going to be doing: pipeline reviews and forecast calls. But making sure that there's actually a separate thing, that's a one-on-one meeting that actually not that is specifically not focused on deal review, but instead is focusing on reviewing metrics and making sure that you're progressing coaching initiatives, whatever the initiative might be. So like, this is something that we, from a customer success standpoint, really help our customers focus on. Is oftentimes organizations have a main thing that they're trying to really drive throughout the organization in a given quarter, and it might be cross-selling a new product, or it might be self-generated pipeline, or it might be getting pipeline hygiene under control. Whatever it is, this is the place where you're going to be evaluating that as well. Same with, and then of course that then rolls into QBRs on a quarterly basis, etc. Jim, is there a particular, your favorite operating rhythm feature, right? Like a particular meeting, or kind of like, generally they're meetings, a particular kind of part of your operating rhythm that you're a big fan of?
Yeah, we actually recently just redid our operating cadence from a sales
I
perspective.
love it. Nice.
Before we were really, our enablement team is awesome. We got lots of great content, but a lot of times it would be 2-3 hour meetings at the end of the month, like really just honing in on enablement, which was a lot. Then we'd have our team meeting for forecast, and then we have one-on-one meetings. And really that was it. Then SDRs and AEs would get together. So we kind of broke it up, and now we do every other Thursday, we call it empowerment hour. And it's very quick hitting, we're going to have like a customer success story at the top. We're going to have
love it.
Maybe an announcement, or so reps can hear what customers are doing, right? So they can go and use that out in the field. Quick announcements from different parts of the organization. And then we pick a topic and we go deep on it for 45 minutes. We just started this.
I love it.
The following Tuesday, we have what's going to be called Tune Up Tuesday, which will be reinforcement of what we learned at a team level. So this is at an aggregate level. And then we to a smaller team. Hey, what did we learn last Thursday? Here's why we want to apply it. Let's look at your meetings coming up. How can you apply this? Then the following Tune Up Tuesday, don't have an empowerment hour the next Thursday. The following one, we'll listen to gong calls together and see how that's being reinforced. So that's kind of one aspect. And then we have,
I love it.
In our one-on-one manager calls, we'll do a forecast call 1 week, and then the next week we'll do pipeline review for 2 quarters out, for 1 or 2 quarters out. So we're always looking at 180 to 270 days out, and it's just looking at, do we have enough pipeline? If we don't, what's our prospecting look like? And we're leveraging Atrium accountability dashboards in a lot of these different meetings. So how can we, by rep, understand, hey, where's my strengths, where are my weaknesses within the business, and then focusing on them. So that's how we've changed things up. Then we also have Stay Thirsty Wednesday. Stay Thirsty is one of our values, and that's Prospecting Wednesday, basically, where we have an hour-long prospecting session that's usually tied to Empowerment Hour.
Man, absolutely fantastic. And I think what you guys just heard right there is like, that's how a big hit sales organization breaks up. It's not like, hey, we're gonna have a team meeting that's like 90 minutes long, and it's got like everything in there in the kitchen sink, and of course, people are checked out. It's like, hey, here's this thing right here, we're gonna run this drill, right? We're gonna do like a 2-minute drill on this specific thing right here. Great, we got everyone's attention. Okay, break. And then just make sure that this is why we have a terminology here at Atrium that I coined called calendar is destiny. So if you really want to do something, right, like, hey, prospecting is important. Okay, cool. Prove it to me by putting a block on everyone's calendar to drive prospecting, right? You can do all the enablement stuff in the world around like template provision and kind of like contact or account identification provision and contact provision. But if you don't have the place on the time on the calendar to make it happen, then it's unlikely to happen, right? And so we've seen this a lot with customers we've worked with, where like they'll set a bunch of AE prospecting goals around from an activity standpoint, from an input standpoint around like, emailing or calling behavior, net new accounts being touched, things like that. And then an output behavior, like number of self-sourced opportunities, amount of self-sourced pipeline. And then they go and they do that, and they're like, boy, we're not really like moving the needle here. And it's like, great. Well, when did you prescribe that people are supposed to be doing it? It's like crickets. And it's like, great. Well, okay. Well, like measuring it, and it's like expecting it to happen without the enablement and the accountability loop is kind of like hoping against hope. One thing that we find that we hear from our customers that folks really like about the Atrium sales coach is in the one-on-one, just like super helpful to kind of get like a quick, I think some customer the other day said something around this where they're like, yeah, it's just like a mini QBR, right? Like I can walk into a one-on-one and I can quickly look at like what's going on with the rep, right? The sales coach will like synthesize across everything that's going on with them, all the goals that we put in there. And I've got some like obviously we've got the things that we're supposed to be spending, like key initiatives or what have you. But then I'm nicely prepared for kind of other things as well, including high fives, right? A little encouragement, like, hey, I remember we were talking about pipeline hygiene. Look at that. Look at all your untouched ops got cleaned up. High five. Okay, cool. Let's talk about Stay Thursday Wednesday in our prospecting, right? So then the second thing, and this is kind of related to, okay, setting expectations about a specific thing is just, boiling that down to what is the actual level of the thing in question. So in Jim's case, when they're saying, hey, we want to make sure that, that folks are doing their prospecting behavior on Wednesdays. Awesome. How much? Cool. Well, if you're a mid-market team, we have an expectation that you're touching, this many net new accounts on a weekly basis. And so generally speaking, it will probably be this many contacts in each of those accounts, which probably means this many emails. So like, let's say it's you're touching 25 net new accounts on a weekly basis, two contacts in each. So that's maybe 25 accounts being touched, 50 contacts being touched, and probably what that nets into is around 100 customer facing emails. I don't know, I'm just making this up, but the point is like you got to give people some guide rails as to like what good looks like. Because if you're just like, yeah, just do some prospecting, that's kind of like, okay, well, how much, right? And so that can be the case across any of these different behaviors. If you're trying to improve your pipeline hygiene, that can mean, this amount of 30-day untouched ops, or this amount of 60-day untouched ops, or this amount of stuck opportunities. If you're really seeking to multi-thread, so this is something that our organization is really focused on, and Jim was kind of mentioning this earlier, just making sure that folks are highly, highly multi-threaded in their open opportunities. Great. What is that? Is that 2? Is that 4? Right? How many folks should you? And so just making sure that folks, you have a North Star for any given thing, such that, and then you can then measure against them. Because if you don't set that North Star, you're kind of like leaving it up to the individual there. This is actually something that we shipped recently, where Atrium does recommended goal levels based on historical behavior of a given team. So let's say that you want to set I don't know, like a new opportunity inflow expectation on like a monthly basis for a given mid-market team or enterprise team. What it'll do is it'll look back across the trailing time period, depending on what the interval is. Like if you're setting it on like a monthly basis, it'll look at the trailing 6 months. If you're setting it on a quarterly basis, it'll look back across the prior year and say, oh, okay, cool. Like this is what the 50th percentile for this type of rep, right, across your the 20 reps that are like this person, or the 40 reps that are like this person. And so here's your jumping off point, right? Because sometimes people will set these goals completely in the abstract there. And of course, you want to do the same thing from an SDR standpoint as well. Jim, anything you wanted to comment on around like kind of setting clear expectations around kind of like metrical performance? Again, these precursor metrics.
Yeah, definitely have that's what I love about what's new with that new piece that you rolled out within Atrium. We have the data to back up why. Because like before we used to do this meeting tracking, it's you have to do 3 net new meetings per week, and no one ever hit it. And a lot of it was lead flow and things like that. And then it's like, okay,
yeah, people complain about it.
let's make it 12 per month, or let's make it 8 per month, and just make sure we set it. Your SMB commercial is going to be different than your enterprise, and make
Yeah.
sure there's some data behind it to where, hey, this is what our most successful reps are having this many meetings, and it's going to be different between people because some people's conversion rates are going to be higher than others. But let's make sure you have some data behind the goals and some reality too. I think
Oh,
is
yeah.
is the big thing as well. So the big thing, the multi-threading is, I love the work you guys did working on that with us, is too, just seeing the triple the
Yeah.
win rate when we get more than 6 people involved in our commercial, and then also more than, I think, 11 people in our enterprise. So reps,
Yeah.
when they see that data, and they go, okay, I'm going to get that goal now. So once they can
Yeah.
attach like an outcome to what some of these goals are here,
Yep.
they just want to know what's the game plan. Like, we go back to football. It's like, what's our playbook? What's the game
Yeah.
plan? And we'll follow it.
Yeah, totally. And I think then that there's an opportunity there. You want to constantly be feeding that back in from a managerial standpoint. Like my son Mikey is 6, right? So junior SMB rep, and so he's playing basketball right now, but also soccer. And so one of the things, little like 6-year-olds, they can barely shoot at the hoop, but they're like so their shot rates are going to be really poor. But what you can focus them, you can't say like shoot better, right? Shoot better, shoot harder, or what have you. But what you can do is you can have them focus in on trying to get more rebounds, as an example. And so
Mm-hmm.
this is something that the team has really been focused on. And so anytime, in this case, Mikey had he had a shot sequence where he shot it, got his own rebound, shot it again, missed again, got his own rebound again, and then on the third shot ended up making it. And so then as a team, we looked at that together where we said, hey, check it out, guys. Look at how diligent Mikey was in grabbing this rebound. And when you get your own rebounds, good things happen. Right. And so we see this where not only do you have organizations that close, like, they look at the win rates associated with or deals that are highly multi-threaded or have high numbers of customer facing meetings that have happened over time. That, like, when those deals close, you have to celebrate that. And like, look at this. This deal had 12 people involved. That's crazy. By the way, not surprising, right? So
Yeah.
guys, jump for the like push forward, push forward, push forward. Um, Cool. So then the last thing I want to kind of touch on here, or sorry, second to last thing here is once you've set these, then what we can do is we got to inspect this, right? So that what that means is whether have our CRM reporting or our sales performance management software, we got to be looking at this stuff in order to say, hey, you're not at the level that we said that you're going to be at this level of customer facing meeting volume. You're not there. Let's talk about why that's the gap, right? We're going to talk about why that's the case, and then ideally what you're doing is you're paying attention. When Jim was saying this earlier, hey, we don't want to wait for a bookings issue to show up. So we say, great, we got this, do we have enough pipeline? Right. Okay, we don't have enough pipeline based on our historical win rate. Why is that? Is it because we have deals that are falling out of pipe from a conversion rate standpoint? Are we just or do we just not have enough opportunities? Right? Do we not have enough opportunity and flow? So making sure that you're inspecting on that. And then the last thing I want to talk about is you can oftentimes what we've seen with customers is folks will spend a lot of time in the data, but you got to turn it into like real talk, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you got to have those coaching conversations, the management conversations. So making sure that you're giving feedback frequently and immediately, right? It doesn't have to always be coaching, doesn't always have to be corrective. In fact, starting like putting deposits in the bank from a positivity and kind of an encouragement standpoint makes it easier for you to then to coach and hold accountable at other points in time. But of course, making sure that you're doing it frequently and immediately, you're opening with positivity, you're reiterating the reason for the feedback and the coaching, right? Like, hey, remember how there's 3 times the win rate when we multi-thread more, right? Remember, that's the reason we want to make everybody more money. Well, I'm observing that your goal, you're not at that goal level right now. Let's talk about why that might be the case. And then let's talk about what the potential solution would be to that, right? And so these are the sort of things that happen appropriately when you have a good one-on-one cadence. And if you can't get to the place where you're resolving that, maybe that's where when things need to then escalate to like a performance improvement plan. But not have it. So oftentimes people hear about performance improvement plans and they're like, oh yeah, that's there to like, help ease somebody out and fire them. Well, if you're doing these behaviors right here, you won't necessarily have to get to this situation right here, right? And then if you do have to offboard people or offboard a large set of people, a great framework to evaluate there is like the will versus skill, right? Where essentially will being a level of effort and skill being essentially like a craft standpoint. So if people have will and skill issues, right? They're not putting the work in and they have skill issues. Obviously, those folks are at the bottom of the stack. Reps that have will deficits who just aren't kind of putting in the effort, oftentimes it's pretty hard to get them to upskill and also change this, because this is oftentimes an internal motivation, kind of like work ethic thing. If you identify this, they're probably not a good fit for sales in general. And then the last folks that, oftentimes if somebody has will, you can, but is missing skill, you can oftentimes upskill them, right? And so this is an example of something that we've done quite a bit here at Atrium, at least with our kind of our sales coach functionality, is just making it such that it's just super easy for folks to take those managerial actions to like, send a high five email, to send a coaching or a coaching email or a coaching Slack message, or even generate custom enablement plans based on things. So I think that's everything we wanted to cover here. I know that we wanted to do a little poll here, so I think we're going to have our team go ahead and pop that here. But Jim, while that poll is kind of being popped open here, is there anything that you wanted to kind of like add and kind of close on here?
No, I think it's just having active conversations continually, not just on deals and not just on quota attainment with your reps, as far as having these conversations is super important. And, using sales coach is a good way to drive the direction of those conversations. It's backed by data. I think the biggest thing that I've learned is reps are yearning to understand, what does good look like beyond quota attainment? What is the scoreboard you're using? What is good? Where can I get better? These folks that are on our team, they're competitive and they want to perform. They don't want to be at the bottom of the list, and they want to make money and be successful. So, be a coach, and I love coaching, and just having those types of conversations, and then back it up with data and kind of tell them with a what's in it for me, what's in it for them type approach. I think will be successful. I know it looked like Kevin had a question there too, that maybe how to get started on this, as far as a place that's been has not had high performance culture. And I think you got to ease into it, like pick one or two tricks and like understand how the business works. And then what are the activities that will get us to our lagging indicators, right? And it's kind of be a slow roll with it, but definitely.
It's kind of like, you don't want to. We oftentimes have to do this with our customers. Like, people will be really like fired up. They're like, we're going to install a performance culture. We're like, hey, let's not cannonball in the jacuzzi here, Tiger. Let's ease in. Why don't we set a couple of weekly, a couple of monthly, and a couple of quarterly goals, and we can kind of start with that. And we're going to keep them simple to start. Maybe it's first meetings, maybe it's total meetings, maybe it's new opportunity ownership. We'll start with that for the first quarter, right? Especially when you have a situation where folks are when folks are kind of just starting out. Wonderful. Well, thanks everyone for joining us. I think we're going to drop another link here to the kind of the sales management boot camp. Hi, Eduardo. Good to see you. Jim, this is absolutely fantastic. I really appreciate you taking the time to kind of go through this with us. Eduardo, was there anything you wanted to cover before we skedaddle?
I just wanted to say thank you for the audience. The participation was great. Audience, you will receive a follow-up email from me or Vanessa with the recording for this event, the slides, and some key takeaways. If you liked what you heard here today, audience, please, there's a button at the top of this page that says request a demo with our sponsor, so the Atrium team can get in touch with you later today, and then you can learn a little bit more how to get a culture of high performance in your teams. Um, Jim and Pete, the conversation was really fantastic. I think we got some great key takeaways for our audience. Thank you so much for joining us. We can go hang out backstage. I see in the chat the audience is just saying like, "Great to be here. Thanks for the session. They learned so much." So thank you both. While we hang out backstage, the MSP team will make sure that the audience gets the video and everything that you talked about here today. So thank you so much for joining us. I'll see you next time.
Okay, thanks,
Thanks,
guys.
everyone.